All right, good morning, people. We are back again with another episode of my tutorial. So, my name is Eliaza, and you are watching EA Lego Academy. So, we finished in our last tutorial, we looked at variables and simple data types, and we saw how they are very important and paramount to writing code. So we need variables and we need data types to write code. And we explicitly explained and talked about what we talked about their importance to programming. So now today we're going to look at data structures, what they are. So now data structures, these are variables that can be assigned multiple values, with those values being kept either inside a square bracket, a parenthesis, or a curly bracket. Now, starting with the list data structure, the list data structure is a variable that can be assigned multiple values of any data type, with those values being kept inside a square bracket. All right, so since we're starting with the list data structure, I would write an example. I would create a list data structure that has some string values inside. So we know that a list is a variable. So I'll create my list and I will call it courses. That's what I would call it. And I would open a square bracket and I would insert those values inside. Now I'm creating a list of string values. So these values can be of any data type. They can either be strings, they can be numericals. Now there is another data type that I have not really talked about, but we are going to explicitly talk about it when we get to conditional statements. So the data type I'm talking about is the Boolean data type. So it allows us to store true or false values. So we will look at that. So but for now, I'm creating a list that has string values contained within its square bracket. So I'm going to create some courses. I would say physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics. So now you can see that I have a list of 4 string values. So what I would do, I'll come here and print it out, and you would see the result printed out in the console. Now you would see that I have a list of string values. So now this topic is called Introduction to Lists. Introduction to Lists. So that's how you can create a variable and assign it multiple values and then print out the result. All right, so the next thing that we're going to look at is accessing elements in a list. So how do we access elements in a list? Now the way to access elements in a list is by specifying the index position. So to do that, we will need to access that element by its index position. Now there's something we have to get out of the way. Now when we look at this list that has these 4 string values, the first element, physics, is at the 0 index. That's how we number. We start to number elements in a data structure starting from the 0 index or starting from the 0 position. Specifically Python, when we look at the list data structure and when we treat tuple data structure later on, you will discover that the first element starts at the 0 index. So physics starts at the 0 index, and the last element of a list or the last element in a list always begins at the -1 index position. So it doesn't matter the size of that list. By size, I mean how many elements are present in that list. It doesn't matter the number of elements present in that list. The first element always starts from the 0 index, and the last element always starts from the -1 index. So if I want to access chemistry as an example from this list called courses, I would specify 1. So if since I know that physics is at the 0 index, obviously chemistry would be at the 1 index. biology would be at the 2 index, and mathematics would be at the 3 index. Likewise, mathematics is also at the -1 index. So mathematics is both at the 3 index and -1 index. I can use either of those indexes to access mathematics. And going backwards from mathematics, biology would be at the -2 index. Likewise, chemistry would be at the -3, and physics would be at the -4. So now from what we can see that physics is both at the 0 index and -4 index. So if I want to access chemistry as an example, I can use -3 or 1 index to access physics. So I can just come here and say print courses at the 1 index, and it will print out chemistry for me. If I click on play, you will discover that chemistry will be printed out. And likewise, also if I say -3, we discover that chemistry 2 would also be printed out. So that's what we mean by indexing, or accessing an element in a list. We access elements from a list by their index position. I hope that is clear. If it's not clear, just watch the video again and you will get it. All right, so comment it out so that we can proceed, because we don't have much time. We don't have the luxury of time to, drag our feet. All right, now we want to look at using individual values from a list. So using individual values from a list. Now, the reason why I didn't comment out this list is because I'm going to use it throughout. So I'm going to use it throughout, and what I will do is that I will also be giving classworks and exercises so that you can be able to test yourself and test your ability, test your comprehension capacity, basically, because that's the only way you can learn as a programmer. You learn by practicing. Now, there was something I was supposed to have done. I was supposed to have created an extra Python file for introduction to lists, so that I don't stray and we don't, mix up each of our topics together. So what I'm going to do, I would right click here and create a new Python file and call it list intro. Now this code in previous Python file, for when we looked at variables and simple data types, I would copy everything, cut it out, and I will come here and paste it so that we can have a clean place to write our code. All right, so using individual values from a list. So that what this simply means, this is when we target an element in a list by its index position, and then we use that element to make a sentence. That's just what it means. So here we're going to apply our knowledge of string formatting, such as f-strings, format methods, and the C-style string. So you can use any one of your choice. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to print out a sentence. I would use the format method, and I want to use biology to make a sentence. So I would say, hey there, you study, open a curly bracket, like, can't remember what I'm doing, go back to my previous tutorials and you'll be able to understand. So I don't want to repeat things that I have already treated, because I assume that you guys are following this tutorial. So courses, biology is at the 2 index. So this will make a sentence and it will say, hey there, you study biology. So you see we have that. So I'm using it to make a sentence. You can see that here I apply the same principle of targeting the element at that index position, and of course we know what the format method is doing. It's reading the value stored inside this variable. Automatically, courses at this 2 index has become a variable, and the value is that element at that particular index. So the same thing that the format method is doing is reading that value and using it to make a sentence. So it is taking that value and then using that value to replace this empty curly bracket. I hope that makes sense. When you are done, you comment it out. All right. Next thing we want to look at. All right. So we want to look at changing, adding, and removing elements from a list. So changing, adding, and removing elements from a list. So how do we do that? So we want to start with changing first of all. So changing, what it simply means is, this is when we target an already existing element in a list and then we change that element to another value. Basically, that is what it means. So you target an already existing element in a list. You target it by its index position and then you change it to another value. So that we do not cause confusion, I'm going to copy this list and bring it down so that we don't have to keep on scrolling up to see if we are on track. We will just copy this list, comment this one out, come back down here and paste it so that we can be working with it continuously. All right, so maybe I want to change physics to another course. Maybe this person decided to change the course that he signed up for in his department. So maybe I want to change it to engineering as an example. So engineering. Now you will discover that if I should print out this list again, you will see that engineering will take the position of physics. It will take the position of physics. So you can do this to any course at any index and it will work. So this has successfully allowed me to change physics to engineering. So that's what we mean by changing an element in a list. You target the index position and then you assign it a new value. That makes sense. All right. The next thing we want to look at is adding. So we want to look at how we can add elements. So adding elements to a list. How do we do that? So we do that by using two functions. The first function is called the append function, and then the next one is called the insert function. All right, so now I'll quickly be very brief. Now the append function allows us to add an element after the last element inside the list. That's what it does. So after the last element that was inside that list, the append function would allow us to add another element. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add another course after mathematics to the list. So like I said, we're not going to keep scrolling up to see the elements in our list. The previous list we copied, just paste it down there and we would continue using it from here. So what I was, maybe this person wanted to add architecture to his courses. So course dot append, this is how you do it. So append only takes so append only takes a single element in its parentheses. You cannot add, maybe peradventure I wanted to add another value, maybe engineering. It does not work. It doesn't. It only takes one element per time. So you can come here and print out the result and see that it will make a sentence with, rather to print out the added course to the already existing courses. So that's what the append function does. So if you want to add multiple elements, you have to come to the next line and add another values there, and you will discover that it will add elements to it like that. So after architecture, you will discover that engineering also will be added to it. So that's how you can add elements to a list. I hope that makes sense. All right. So that's how you can use the append function. Now the next one is the insert method. So um, methods and functions, they basically mean the same thing. So if you don't want to call them methods, you can call them functions. They mean the same thing. So what we are looking at here, the append and the insert, they are what you call inbuilt functions inside the list class. So the list data structure that we're talking about is a class. I don't want to bore you out with the intricacies. As we progress in this course, you are going to understand these various concepts. So we know what functions are. I think I talked about them. I said when I explained object-oriented programming, my first tutorial during the installation setup, I said that functions are containers that allow us to hold multiple lines of code. So now the append and the insert, the append which you have seen and the insert which you are about to see, they are what you call inbuilt functions inside the list class. So the next one is the insert. We're going to see how we can be able to create our own functions very soon. So we're going to see how we can be able to create our own functions very soon. So you paste that down. Now, contrary to the append function, the insert function allows us to target the index position of where we want to insert an element into a list. It allows us to specify the index position. So we know that in a list, the first element starts from the 0 index and the last element starts from the -1 index back to the front. The insert function allows us to specify the exact index position we want to insert an element to inside the list. So insert. So maybe I want to insert the architect, the same architect at the 1 index. Now, what it will do is that it's not going to remove chemistry from that index position. It's going to shift chemistry to the next index, which is the 2 index, and it's going to take the place of chemistry. So what I would do here, I would add architect to be at the 1 index. And you will discover that when I print this out, to print out architect in the position of chemistry, but chemistry would now be at the 2 index. You can see that. So architects at the position of chemistry, while chemistry moves to the 2 index. So now what you are seeing here is just basically IntelliSense from the Python IDE, PyCharm. So PyCharm telling us the index position. You can see I didn't type this, it just appeared by itself. And then since in programming we treat everything we work with our code as objects, it's telling you that the value you are trying to insert at that specific index is being treated as an object. I hope that makes sense. All right, so you comment it out when you are done, and then on to the next. Right, so these are the two functions we use to add elements to a list in Python. Now, the next thing we want to look at is removing elements from a list. So how do we do that? With elements from a list. How does that work? So I'm still working with the same list so that we don't waste time. All right, now we have three types of functions that we use to carry this out. Now, the first one is the pop method. Like I said, method and functions mean the same thing. So pop, remove, and del. So now, in programming, functions that don't have parentheses are called statements. Statements. They are functions because multiple lines of code make them up. But for the fact that they don't have parentheses at their front, we refer to them as statements. All right, so now the pop function allows us to remove an element from a list by its index position. So you target the index position of that element you are trying to remove from that list, and you remove it. It's as simple as that. So you call the name of the list first, then you say .pop, and then you target the index position. So maybe I want to remove biology from this list. What do I write there? So I would write the 2 index because biology is at the 2 index. You come down here, you say print, and then you say courses, and you will discover that by the time you print out your result, you are left with only physics, chemistry, and mathematics. Yeah, physics, chemistry, and mathematics. So that's how the pop function works. When you're done, comment it out. Right, the next thing we want to look at is the remove method. So how does the remove method work? I'm sure you know that these things I'm trying out, you can try it out on all the lists. Sorry, on all the elements in the list. So just really showing you the modus operandi, that is the method of operation, and then if I give you exercises to do, you know how you're going to do it. Using what I've just taught you, you're going to apply it into solving your own problems. So, like in programming, one thing I would let you to, I would make known to you is that you cannot be a good programmer if you do not practice. All right, so we're still working with the same list. I said, and I want to use the remove method. So you just say courses dot remove. And now, what the remove method does is that it allows us to remove an element from a list by its value. You target the value of that element that you are trying to remove from that list. That's how it works. So now if I want to remove, let's say physics, I'm going to write physics in the parentheses. And when I print out my lists again, you will discover that physics would have left the list. You see that we don't have physics anymore. That's basically how it works. And after that, you want to comment it out. Now the last one that allows us to remove an element from a list is the del statement, del method. Now this is how it works. It allows us to target the index position similar to the pop function. The element we're trying to remove from a list, it allows us to target its index position in order to remove it. So that's how you do it. You write del, then you give a space, then the name of the list, and then you target the index position. So maybe I want to remove, let me remove mathematics. So mathematics is at the 3 index. So you can come down here and say print courses, and then you will discover that mathematics would have left the list. That's how it works. So basically, this is how you can modify elements in a list by changing, adding, and removing. All right. So now the next topic we're looking at under introduction to list is organizing. Organizing lists. How do we do that? So like I said, in order to keep things plain and simple, I'm using the same list. So organizing a list is when we arrange elements in a list in either an ascending order, or it is in either an ascending order, descending order, or a reversed order. So I'll take that again. When we talk about organizing elements in a list or organizing a list, it is when we arrange elements in that list in either an ascending order, descending order, or in a customized order. Now, the first method, and we do so using the following methods. Now, the first method we use is the sort method. Like I said, methods are also called functions. Now, the next method is called the sorted method, and then the last one is called reverse method. So we'll take them one after the other. Now, starting with the sort. So, how do we use the sort method? Now, the sort method, it's a method or a function that allows us to arrange elements in a list in an ascending order permanently. It allows us to arrange elements in a list in an ascending order permanently. Now, you will discover that after I have written this line of code, courses.sort, if I should print out my list, you will discover that it's going to print it out in an ascending order, whereby we're going to have biology first, followed by chemistry, followed by mathematics, and then physics. So if I should come here and say print courses, you will discover that my elements will be printed out in that list in that order I just described. That's how it works. And the reason why we say it's permanent is because the more I print out this list, the more I will get the list in an ascending order. So the list will not go back to its previous order. It will remain in an ascended order. Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, you can watch the video again. All right, the next thing we want to look at is the sorted method. Sorted. So now the sorted method, it allows us to arrange elements in a list in an ascending order temporarily. So what do we mean? This is what we mean. We mean that as you print out elements from that list using the sorted method, you only get it in an ascending order at that point in time when you print it out. If you are to print out the list again, normally you are going to get the list back in its original state. That's basically what we mean. So it only gets printed out in an ascending order at that point in time. So what I mean by that is that, and we can only do that using the print function. So it means that it will print out in an ascending order at this point as I'm printing it out using sorted. But if I decide to print out my list again, normally I'm going to get it in its original state. So if I come here and say print courses again, normally I will get back my list in its original state. So you discover that the first print out, which is this one here, using the sorted method, print it out in an ascending order at that point in time when I printed it out using the sorted method. But the second time when I printed out my list, it gave me back my list in its original state. So the sorted method only works for when you are printing out the list immediately at that point. Does it make sense? All right, so that's how you can arrange elements in a list in an ascending order. Now let's look at the reverse method. So what does the reverse method do? Now, the reverse method does not work for only lists that are in ascending orders. It also works for lists that are in no particular order whatsoever. So what it does is that it allows us to print out elements from a list starting from the last to the first. Basically, that's what it does. And it does it permanently as well. What I mean by permanently is that the more you print out the list, the more you get the list printed out, starting from the last element to the first. So you can come here and say courses dot reverse. When I print out my list courses, you will discover that it's going to print it out starting from the last to the first. So each time you say print courses, you get it like that in that state. Okay. So Python prints out code, or Python executes code line by line. Python does not jump any line of code. It executes code line by line. So that's how the reverse method works. All right, so now let's look at printing out elements in a list in a descending order. So printing out elements in a descending order. So now what this means is that this is when we first of all apply the sort method to a list to arrange it in an ascending order, and then we now apply the reverse method to print out those elements from the list that has been arranged in an ascending order in a descending order. So we first apply the sort method to a list to arrange it in an ascending order, and then we now apply the reverse method to reverse that list that was in an ascending order so that it can appear in a descending order. Does that make sense? All right. Even if it doesn't make sense to you, you're going to soon find out what that means. So you say courses.sort, then you say courses.reverse. So what's happening here is that the first line of code, the dot sort, allows us to arrange elements in an ascending order. Now that elements that have been arranged in an ascending order, this function reverse would now reverse it. So you know that if we reverse a list that is in an ascending order, you know that you are going to get that list in a descending order. So it's just simple logic. Down here, you print courses, and then you discover that it would arrange the list and at the same time print it out back in a descending order. You see this descending, because if you look at it starting from the last element here, biology, you will discover that it is in an ascending order. So that's how we roll when we look at organizing the list. All right, so we have some other extra functions in Python, some other functions. So Python has so many inbuilt functions, and I cannot treat everything in my tutorial. So what I would advise you is that once I'm done with this tutorial series, everything, I would advise you, I would post a book that you can get, and I'll give you the link on how you can get that book. It allows you to learn everything in the Python standard library. So it's thousands of pages. So you cannot master every function in Python in programming whatsoever, but you need to have a head start. You need to know the skills, or you need to have the skills needed for you to be relevant in the market. So that's the most important thing. All right, one some other functions. We have the len function that tells us how many elements we have in a list. So I will still be using this list, and I'll just come here and say print len courses. This will print out 4 because we have 4 elements in this list. So it will print out 4. And then we have another function called the sum. Now this function does not work for string values, for a list of string values or elements. It works for only numbers. So I can just create a list called numbers now. I'll just say salary. I already have numbers created up. I haven't commented it out. So salary, you can say 1, 2, 3, 20. Say 1, 7, 440, 220, 120, 147, 280, and 119, 310. Right, so what's going to happen here is that I'm going to apply the sum function to add everything together. The sum salary, and if I should print it out, so let me comment out this one. Forgot to do that. When you run your code, you will discover that you add everything together and give you 746,470. So that's what the sum function does. It allows us to add everything together in this list and gives you a result. So what I'm going to do is that I still have some other functions to look at. So I'll copy this and I'll comment this one out. Comment it out. Now the next one is we have the main function. Alright, so now the main function from the name tells us the smallest element in a list data structure. In a numerical list data structure, numerical, take note. It does not work for string values, it works for numbers. So this should print out 102, the first one. Alright. Then we have another one called max. From the name, you can already know what it's talking about. It tells us the biggest numerical value in a numerical list. Come down here, say print max salary. And if you print it, if you run this code, you get 220, the biggest one. All right, guys, that's that for this tutorial series about the introduction to lists. The next one we're going to look at is how we can work with lists, work with elements in a list. And I promise you, I will deliver. All right, so before we go, I'll give you some exercises to do, which I would advise you to do so that you can get better as a programmer. So the first one, number one, is create a list. Create a list that has 6 string elements. Access the fourth element and then use it to make a sentence. Now I will tell you that the fourth element is not the element at the fourth index, so do your maths properly. Now let me just give you some hints. You can see that here this first element in this list 102 320 is the first element. This one 157 440 is the second element. 220 120 is the third, like that. But they are different index. The first element is not at the 1 index, it's at the 0 index. So with that, having said that, I'm sure you know how to go about that. All right, so the next question from the list in question 1, add more elements after the last element and print out the updated list. Number 3, from the list in question 1, add an element after the third element and then print out the updated list. Number 4, from the list in question 1, remove the second to the last element list and print out the updated list. So now let me just add this one for bonus. So I'll create a list. I'll create a list. I'll just say scores. Scores. So now these were the scores of some people in a test. 84, 9, 91, 92, 7, 80. So this is the bonus question. You can do it if you want to fill it out. From the list called scores, find the average. So now you just apply a bit of mathematics to this and solve it. Find the average and then use the result Alright guys, that's all for the tutorial for this tutorial. In my next tutorial, I will show you how you can be able to work with lists. Alright, till then, have a very nice day.